Good morning, everybody. And thanks, Greg. I don't know if you noticed, Greg and I coordinated outfits today. That's very tough to do since I came from out of state and he's local. But as you can tell when I saw him walk in the room, it's exactly the same. It was a little bit strange. I didn't have anything else to change into, so we're going to have to just go with it. But it's always a pleasure to be here. I think this is my third time here, and it's always great to be back in front of you folks. So I'm going to do this a little bit different way. I'm going to tell a little bit of a story and kind of weave some things in here, and hopefully you'll get some good benefit out of it and some laughs and stuff. A little bit about me, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I did do a little bit over 23 years with the FBI. I retired as a supervisory special agent. I ran the West Palm Beach office down in Florida, and I did that 4 years ago, and then I've been Maryland ever since, which is really a privilege. I've got a few Maryland folks today. The most recent one that's come on board is Mark Zimmerman. He's our Director of Fraud and Enforcement. I would like to say that, proud to say that he's also a retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent. So I live in a very small town on a lake with my wife and a dog, and the kids are almost out of college, so life is very good, as you can see. Today, I just wanted to go over, we got some learning objectives. I think they're important for you. It's also important for CPE. We're going to look at the economic impact of insurance fraud, which I think some of you may know, and I'm going to put it in a little bit of a different format. We're also going to analyze some real-world study cases, what the impact is, not just on consumers, not just on businesses, not just on our states, but also the banking industry. And then we're going to evaluate some strategies on how to combat that and kind of what the future looks like. So I'll kind of take you through that in the next 45 or 50 minutes. If you have any questions, feel free. You can wait till the end. If it's super important, Greg's going to be handling those. So we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to start with an agenda question of how many fuels insurance fraud. We're going to talk a little bit about the challenges, about how that impacts the financial impacts. We're going to look at technology and time. We're going to look at some of the regulatory framework, do a couple case studies, and then we're going to do some takeaways. Okay. This first slide is pretty interesting. When I was a new agent, I had 2 years on, and I had the benefit. I got paired up with a federal prosecutor, and they're called Assistant United States Attorneys. His name just happened to be Louis Perez, and he kind of took me underneath of his wing. I kept showing up at his office every day. And before then, I had glasses. I didn't get LASIK yet. And so I'd show up at his office at 7 a.m., and I'd say, I have a case, I have a case. He'd read his newspaper, and he really didn't pay much attention to me until one day I got his attention because I came enough, and I sat down with him. And he said, well, what did you do in your case? And I said, well, I talked to him about all these interviews I'd done all this surveillance. And I just thought I'd had this, and I put it in a binder. And he looked at me and he goes, well, where's the bank accounts? And what's the impact? What's the impact on the insurance companies, the consumers? How are we going to, if we're going to be in front of a judge and a jury? And so from that point forward, I always kind of thought about that the who, what, when, and where, and why comes from the financial impact. And so he also taught me that basically almost like a business person, you got to spend money to make money. The same thing is true actually in fraud. And so I'm going to weave you through that kind of little way. I think it'll make sense to you. So the Coalition Against Insurance Fraud, they're usually an NAIC partner. I'm not sure, Greg, if they're here this week, but Michelle Raffel, Brent Walker, they're here a lot of times. So impact number one, to all of us in this room, to all of the consumers in our various states, from everybody's ears, the number is staggering. And so when you think about $400 to $700, I'm sure from where this one was produced a couple of years ago, it's much higher now. But it's also an impact on the individual victims. And so I'm sure you deal with victims at some point in time. We certainly do in the Fraud and Enforcement Division of the MIA. And the $400 to $700 can turn into, we had a case that came in that was $240,000. We had a case that was $480,000. The $480,000 was a gentleman who wasn't very old, but he was 68 years old, and it constituted basically his life savings. And he had gotten taken in a scam. So the financial impact of insurance fraud is absolutely staggering. And so it's important for us, we're very consumer oriented, as I'm sure you are at the MIA, and then we make sure that there's a level playing field with the people that we license. So it's important to note that first figure there is of a magnitude that requires our attention and our due diligence. A lot of that comes from just a few areas. Health insurance. And I should step back a second. I guess most of my experience, although it was pretty varied in the FBI, for over half of that, I actually worked insurance fraud cases. And I worked it with the Florida Department of Insurance Fraud at the time. It was called Florida DIF, DIF. They're now Department of Investigative and Forensic Services. And the director there, Simon Blank, and I actually worked some cases many, many years ago. So all I did was work mainly insurance cases. But if you look here, the healthcare fraud I kind of have breaking down into two. One is Medicare and Medicaid, and the other one is healthcare, and I put that as private payer. And so I want to introduce you a name because I figured I'm just going to use an example. But one of the first cases I had where I took to fruition, and it was a long story, but I'll make it short, was a defendant by the name of Alfredo Omar Rodriguez. And he was doing insurance fraud on a massive level. And at the time, he was doing it from around $100 million. Now, $100 million back in the early 2000s was a lot of money. And we finally caught him. We caught him in the Bahamas as he was fleeing. I caught him on a boat out there. And he had a very interesting story to tell. And I wanted to talk about the impact and how that relates. And I'm sure you'll see why. For the first 5 years before he started doing insurance fraud, he did two things. He did human smuggling, not trafficking. He brought people over from Cuba on boats, brought them to the United States. And then he transitioned to that to running narcotics from Cuba to the United States. During a trip, he was coming over and the seas got rough and it was him and his brother. The boat overturned. He survived and his brother didn't. At that time, he still made it to shore. Not sure how, he never told me that. But when he said to me, after he was being debriefed and he started cooperating, he said, "Why am I risking my life coming across the Straits of Florida?" And he goes, "Why am I running narcotics where people may want to kill me?" And he switched to insurance fraud. And he goes, "Frankly, it was easy." Sitting there as an agent, is it the right thing that you want to hear? You're like, it's easy. That's great. I said, okay, so walk me through the board. I'm going to go ahead and do that through this presentation, and I'll kind of weave it in there. But one of the things that he said to me was, and it always stuck to me, was he said to me, I'm asking him questions, and we're being debriefed. And so in the federal system, there's no parole. So if you score out to 25 years, you can cooperate and get time taken off, okay? If you don't do that, you're gonna spend all 25 years in prison. He decided to cooperate, and we wound up charging about 40 more defendants. He wound up getting, I think, around 17 years, no parole in federal prison. And so during those debriefs, he stopped me one time and he goes, and not a quasi-friendship, but it was at least respectful. He says, "You're talking like law enforcement. You're asking me questions like law enforcement." He goes, "You have to think like I do, someone who commits fraud." He goes, "Look at it a different way. So everything that you do from here on out," he goes, "quit asking the questions you're asking and think about it like I think about it. I'm trying to take gaps in the system and steal from the system." He goes, "Your job should be," and kind of funny, this is a guy who's in prison. I'm visiting him in prison. I get to go home at night, okay? "You need to think like me, and you need to fill the gaps." I never forgot about that the rest of my career. We also deal a lot in property and casualty insurance fraud, okay? auto insurance, that bleeds over into some like chiropractic clinics, your staged accidents and that kind of things. How many people have the homeowners insurance fraud? You know, that the old roof scheme, sure, it's probably in every state. Hey, they show up at your door, they solicit you, you know, they ask you, hey, by the way, we can get you a new roof. How do they get you a new roof? Hey, go inside for safety purposes, right? You might hear some loud banging and some strange noises, and then come back out after we knock on the door. After they knock on the door, they tell you they've got like so many shingles and everything busted up, right? And then we have commercial property fraud. Okay, somebody gets in over their head. They may use arson to burn down to get out of a bad loan deal. All of that has an impact on the insurance rates, the insurers, and then ultimately the consumers. That impact is fantastically overwhelming at times. I wanted to bring into here a couple of challenges because I think in today's world, the financial impact has really changed a lot in the last 5 or 10 years. I think if you look back at where you were in your careers, in your respective positions, in your respective states, what it looked like 10 years ago versus today, and the way in which AI is accelerating things, it's really across all facets. And there are many companies that are putting a lot of money in technology into that, from ChatGPT to Gamma AI to you name it, Gemini AI. And it seems like the easy button. I'm going to show you why it's the easy button and why it's not. You know, the NAIC, I think appropriately said, there's hard and soft fraud, right? Hard fraud, more complex, could be straight up fraud. A lot of fraud's actually soft, when you think about it. And you can take a couple examples of that. Maybe there's roof damage, right? Let's just take that example. Could there be like $3,000 or $4,000 of roof damage that's repairable? Sure, right? Does every roof need to be a new roof? No. We all know that. On healthcare, you submit claims. So if you look at like an evaluation and management code, like your 99 series codes, okay, a lot of those are time-based. Same with like anesthesiology. They're basically unit-based, okay? Well, how easy is it if I'm seen by a doctor, right, and I have a code that pays for 15 minutes, but what if I start billing everything as if I was seen for 45 minutes? I doubt very many of us have been seen by a doctor these days for 45 minutes. It might be a specialist, and it might not be a good way to be because it would be a bad specialist if you're seeing somebody for 45 minutes. But we still see E&M codes come across, even in the state of Maryland, through our health exchange. And and we have a case now, and I'm not going to get into specifics, with mental health therapy, which is really something that we're looking at greatly, which is to expand the coverage there and make sure that the people get the coverage that they need. But every single, this single provider at least billed 1 hour every time, even on weekends, even on holidays, even when they were out of the country. So you never do less than an hour, ever, at any point? Seems a little bit strange. It's a case. So that technology is being adapted rapidly. We have to keep our eye on that. And it changes almost now. It almost seems like by the month. And I throw this out there to you from what Mr. Rodriguez said. We have the ability with the Maryland Insurance Administration to sit on the Corruption and Fraud Task Force led by the FBI's Baltimore field office. And that includes both Maryland and Delaware. And there was a presentation given from a few people, and it really sat with me. And it was talking about all of the various techniques that are being used, AI, in fraud detection. And I just raised my hand because the only thing I could think of was Mr. Rodriguez, and I'm going, that's great. I mean, that sounds positive, and we're trying to prevent it using AI. Well, the bad guys are going to be using it too. Like, first thing I would do is, I mean, if I'm him, I'm jumping on there and figuring out gaps and things of that sort. And I'm going to actually show you an example because, we're with here. I wouldn't do it with the general public. But I'm just saying, I'm just going to show you an example of what that is. But it's kind of an arms race is the way I view it. And so I want you to think about that when you go back home, that it's not a one-to-one relationship. I mean, AI is great in a lot of different ways. I think it's going to lead to a lot of different advances, not only in technology, but in medicine, but it's good and bad. The other challenge I want to talk about, and this is another thing about the impact, the financial impact on fraud, is the value of time. Okay, and I want you to think about that. And there was a study released, and I always like to give things, so it's the detection speeds amongst fraud categories. So I had the unpleasurable experience of my wife dragged me to Scotland for 2 weeks last month. I'm kidding. It was the most fantastic trip. I almost never came home. Okay? But when I landed, I had to fly from Charlotte, and I landed in London Heathrow, and I bought a bottle of water. My credit card is with USAA. Within 1 minute, even though I told them in advance, I got a text message within 1 minute. Hey, there's a $4.88 British pound charge at Heathrow Airport. Is this you? In under a minute. So you can imagine the flags that they have in their system for fraud to just do that. So credit card fraud is actually in milliseconds. That's how quickly their processors will go ahead and at least identify a fraud pattern, right? So next up, we have healthcare. If you look at the big insurance companies, and I never name insurance companies when I speak, but just think of the large ones, right? Okay, there are special investigative units, okay? They're looking at things, and they'll find some anomaly. Hey, something's kicking up, it's out of the blue, it's spiking, okay? But what needs to happen? Might need to interview the doctor, right? Might need to find the patient. It's not all that easy. I mean, when you all try to find victims, it's not exactly easy one-to-one, like pick up the phone, they answer right away, and they tell you yes or no. It takes time, right? So you have to look through it and examine, okay, what did they actually bill? What did they actually receive? Was it their first time visit with a doctor? Was it they took an advanced ambulance trip, but then they didn't have any subsequent ER visit? I mean, I could probably give you 100 examples. All those anomalies will go through there, but then it'll take weeks to several months to go ahead and prove that up. You look at vendor fraud. Vendor fraud is actually pretty quickly. You know, if you might put in an edit into the system in your accounts payable, hey, I don't pay the same vendor twice, okay? Duplicate invoices, shell things, something that doesn't come up. And then you have financial statement fraud, okay? Like the hardest. Worked a couple of those cases. I was the West Palm Beach case agent on the Bernie Madoff case, not the main case agent, that was out in New York, okay? Various requiring multiple channels. You've got to do it. You have to look at SEC filings. It takes a long time. Basically, you almost have to do an audit. Okay, and that's why I was assigned. I was a CPA. I'm still a CPA. But that can be the most egregious. So we're going to talk a little bit about money laundering. I just wanted to switch gears, okay? So when you think about money laundering, right, and you talk about spend money to make money. Money laundering is essentially two things. It's either promotion or concealment. Promotion means I'm taking money from the fraud and I'm furthering the fraud. Meaning I've opened up one illegitimate title company, okay, right? And now I want to open up another one. Well, I need money to do that. So I'm going to take fraudulent money from here and I'm going to put money over here. And then if I continue to keep doing the fraud, that's money laundering, okay? The other one is concealment, okay? And I'm going to explain a little bit more about that because as soon as you get the money, it's not that easy. But the definition is you're hiding it, you know what I mean? You're the ownership and type things, okay? The purpose is You don't want to make it look, a lot of people even try to do money laundering to even not even to pay taxes, even though if you do have a legal income, you actually have to put it on your tax form. Do you? You don't. And then the detection importance is very important. That is another impact of insurance fraud. So there's 3 stages, okay? Placement, layering, and integration. I want you to think about it in very certain things though. Placement, kind of almost the easiest. It's going to sound kind of strange saying it's easy, but if you look, and I just say it from a joke, has anybody seen Cocaine Cowboys on Netflix? Anybody, you can raise your hand. I know people love Cocaine Cowboys. If you look at episode 6, there might be a slightly slimmer agent in that episode where we seized $5 million in cash in bankers' boxes. That was the easy point, was getting the money. He was a janitor from Miami-Dade County. Nothing wrong with being a janitor, something wrong with money, laundering money. They had so much money, they didn't know where to put it. So they just stuck it in the attic. And the only reason I say that is, from this standpoint, okay, sometimes it's easiest just to get the money, right? So it's the dirty money, layering, okay? You have the money. What's the one thing that you want? You don't want it associated with yourself. You want to distance yourself from the money. I know that sounds kind of strange. Wow, I've got, like, let's say I do an insurance fraud and I've got $100,000. I don't want the money coming back to me, okay? I've got to clean the money, right? And then the third is integration, which is now you're trying to bring that money and you're trying to make it legitimate, okay? Real estate investments, and we're going to go ahead and talk about that, but business companies, shell companies, things of that sort. Something that now you could put on a tax return that's not going to raise a red flag, okay? So that's what's extremely important. So those 3 stages kind of set the scene of like a financial impact of where you move money after it's done. Part of that is done through structuring transactions. And here's another impact that insurance fraud has. It puts a strain on the banking system. Every bank has to have an anti-money laundering group, much like insurance companies have to have a very due diligence with a special investigative unit, and they have to look at transactions. So if you go into a bank and you want to do any cash transaction, you want to purchase a car for over $10,000, you're going to go into the bank and it's going to be for more than $10,000. You got to file a currency transaction report. The bank is going to decide that they're going to take all your identification and it's going to go to what's called FinCEN. It's a Department of the Treasury, okay? Why is this key? Because when people start to launder, they also do a secondary thing. Well, they'll usually use amounts just right under $10,000. Or they'll break it up in halves, and they'll pay people to go to one bank on one day, say $6,000, and they'll go to another bank the next day for $4,000. $10,000 in 2 days, that's still a structured transaction. You're structuring a transaction to evade the reporting requirement of a CTR. So it's just something to keep in mind. You can be charged, and we often did, with the same thing. But when you look at transactions, and if you look at bank accounts, and I would implore you that you should be, you're looking at these odd numbers, and you're looking for numbers that are under $10,000. That is a signal. So the global impact of insurance fraud, narcotics, money laundering, it's staggering. Okay, the amount of money that is put, $10 billion on money laundering compliance. And I think the thing that I want to look at is the recovery rate. It is extremely difficult to seize funds. Okay, you actually need to get a seizure warrant. You need to write an affidavit. You have to go before a judge. You have to go through hearings just to get the money back. So it's extremely difficult to do that, right? So it's a big part of the GDP of the world, but I just throw that out there as far as, you know, what the impact is. It's staggering, and insurance fraud is part of that. I wanted to do a couple of case studies, and I've run these case studies, and so I'm going to explain it real quickly. I'm sure a lot of you know what an escrow account is, either with your jobs themselves or actually with something in your personal life. This is a way that insurance fraud, and we've had multiple cases at the Maryland Insurance Administration where escrow accounts have been used in the fraud scheme, actually many cases with title companies, and they go interstate out of the state of Maryland. What is an escrow account? It's a temporary holding account. Could be for a legal settlement. So attorneys, like PI attorneys, they have, if they're doing a staged accident or something like that, or a bodily injury claim, they'll use an escrow account. Title companies. So if you insure title companies, and we insure title agents in the state of Maryland, we use escrow accounts. It's a temporary account. So what are some things that are common about escrow accounts? One of which is they're extremely high volume, right? Two, okay, they have, some of them have small amounts, some of them have large amounts, and a lot of them have estimates. So when you think about closing a house, and housing prices these days are very expensive. Let's say we get an inexpensive house, $300,000. And if you have a really nice house at $300,000, please tell me where you're at. Raise your hand. I should probably use $500,000. So you know that large amounts are going to be going through there. But as we know, the last house that I closed on, we actually had it because of an issue with the inspection. We had to move the date by 10 days. A lot of the stuff that's in the escrow account, and it's on the HUD-1, right, is actually estimates, right? And then they have to be reconciled. So there's literally all these transactions. Has anybody actually done a demand for records or subpoenaed escrow account records? Is it not a complete disaster and scary? It's like Halloween Horror Nights. Really. That's how many transactions are in there trying to make, I've never seen so much. It's literally like a ball of yarn, okay? And the reason that is because you can put a lot of money in there and all of a sudden it becomes kind of commingled and entangled, right? So how is it used? First of all, you place money in there. And so in our cases that we've seen, they put money into the system, right? Hey, make up a fake, a fake HUD-1, right? Put the money in there. All of a sudden, they put a couple $100,000 in there, right? Now you're laying it, you're seemingly legitimate. You're running it through there, okay? You can do it a bunch of different ways. Now you can merge the money out as like another sale. So, hey, almost like a flip transaction. So money comes in, it's dirty, right? Hey, I flipped the transaction on that real estate, and now it comes out on the other side as a sale. Well, now all of a sudden I've cleaned the money. I've taken it from dirty, washed it through the escrow money laundering machine, right? And I'm out on the other side, and now it's integrated, and now it's a clean fund, right? I would implore you to take a look at your escrow accounts. If you have ability to, if you have oversight over title, it's extremely important, and the impact is of the victims that are being defrauded. So one of the other ways that they do it is through staged accidents and lawsuit settlements. They put money in, okay, and it's all of a sudden commingled, and then maybe 6 months later, I go all of a sudden and I send a check for $1 million to Greg. Greg gets the check, and it says insurance settlement, legal settlement. All of a sudden, I've taken whatever dirty money I have, and I've sent it over to Greg, and now it looks like a legal settlement. Who's questioning that? You pretty much need to have somebody on the inside to go ahead and look at that, okay? They put inflated claims, and these days, and we're going to talk a little bit about this in my last 20 minutes with AI, research on your documents. The amount of fabricated documents that we're seeing is unbelievable, okay? And they can be AI generated. HUDs, you name it. All of those settlement documents that go along with it can be done. The Coalition Against Insurance Fraud, they have written formal letters to some of the larger AI companies talking about this issue. I'm not sure what the results are yet, but they're on top of it, at least advocating. They do a great job at that. So why are they escrow accounts to track money launderers? Volume and complexity. Yes, sir.
How clean are these documents that AI generated? Like, is it garbage when you get into it, or are they pretty good?
They're actually pretty good. I'm going to show you an example in a second, and not a full example because it actually scared me, but I'll show you how good it was, and I think you're going to find out. And it can be tweaked too. And AI actually tells you how to improve the document, sir. It's actually, I was shocked from an example. It's layered, so it goes through all these transactions, and then there's a perception of legitimacy, right? So, I mean, I think those things are all, like, the vulnerability graph is escrow accounts. I wanted to bring that to your attention. Shifting gears to, like, medical identity theft, you have personal information, PII that's stolen. You have business email compromise. We have a lot of that at the Maryland Insurance Administration, specific to real estate transactions. We've had several cases where they've diverted funds from a title company by sending emails, taking over and opening up another account. Next thing you know, our victim is out $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 of a Maryland citizen. Medical identity theft is much, much worse. I mean, it takes PII and almost puts it on kind of steroids, right? I think Mark was around in the Bureau, and I want to think it was, 2004, 2008, when we got notice that our OPM, all of my background information and medical records was hacked for my entire application process. So all my information has been out there for 20 years. So I'm still here, though. So it's good. But all that contamination leads to, could be a denial of service. They might, you might be billed for something. And I'm going to give you an example. Healthcare fraud data is targeted a lot. I don't know why it's not even targeted even more, because you can bill so much, and it's really a billing machine. And I'm going to give you an example right after this slide that I think is going to be very pertinent. And to the gentleman's point, I'm going to show you, kind of what it looks like. So the price, and this goes through the dark web. So if you have in concert, I mean, you can imagine the worlds that are colliding here. You have the dark web, which is a whole nother seminar topic to give. And then you have insurance fraud, and then you have the movement of money, okay? But AI does a little bit of everything. It'll bill for you. It'll exploit patterns. It'll use the identity theft that you take off the dark web. It'll manipulate codes, including modifiers, to get you higher reimbursements. But it wasn't, all of this really didn't hit home until about 2 months ago. My mom's 83 years old. She lives in Carroll County, Maryland. And we talk on Wednesday and Sunday nights. So I talk to her on Sunday nights. And she's just a sweetheart. And she calls me on a Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. And the first thing you can possibly think I'm thinking about is, how are you doing? Okay, how's Dad doing? Did the house burn down? I'm going through the records because we never talk on a Tuesday morning. But she says to me, she goes, son, hey, I got a few things in the mail today. And this is back in July. And I go, oh, you did? I go, what'd you get? And she goes, oh, I got some knee braces. And I got some Band-Aid looking things. And I go, Mom, do you have knee problems? No, I'll send them to you. I'll send them to you in the mail. Okay. I'm like, did you cut yourself? No, I didn't cut myself. So that's a sample 1500 form. That's what you need to go ahead and put in a claim. Okay. I'm going to walk you through something, but long story short, I asked her for her Medicare EOBs and Blue Cross Blue Shield supplementals. She got billed about $9,800. She got billed for 2 bilateral, 2 knee braces that are cups and flexion, an elbow brace, a back brace, and also wound care. Tune of about $25,000. they paid a large chunk of it. Both Blue Cross Blue Shield did, and also Medicare, okay? So I started doing that, but to the gentleman's point, I'm sitting there at my computer. I'm not going to say which AI program I used. I typed in, hey, fill me out an 1500 form for an L1844 osteoarthritis case. You would be surprised what came up. It said, what else other questions do you have? I put in a couple of insurance companies. It told me exact diagnosis codes to put in. It told me where to put them in. It told me exactly what to put. It actually told me by insurance company what were they most likely to deny on. It completed the form for me. And I reviewed the form, and I've reviewed thousands of 1500s in my career. And to your point, sir, was there one or two things I would change? But it was pretty complete. The only thing that wasn't in there was an NPI, which is a National Provider Identification Number, which you can just type Google on the internet and just grab a doctor's NPI number and put it in. That's it. You can file the claim. So my mom living in Maryland gets billed by a durable medical equipment company in Florida, in Delray Beach, and then from a wound care facility in Tempe, Arizona. Does any of that make sense? It absolutely doesn't, and it gets paid. They say here, hey, here's what you need to do to bill at the higher rate. Don't bill in 1833, bill in 1844. Okay, it pays more. Okay, detailed prescriptions. It actually gave me like generic language to use for bilateral osteoarthritis of the knees. That was paragraphs in length, as if my mom was actually examined. I mean, it really kind of shocked me after being in this for 25 years. Here's the point, and I wanted to address this. It went down and told me by the box what to put in. Hey, make sure box 24B, home delivery, you maybe want to mark number 11 so it doesn't get denied, right? Hey, all of these things, if you do them correctly, you won't be denied. This service never took place. My mom never needed the medical necessity. And she got a brace that was a neoprene brace, and she got some Band-Aids where they actually billed for wound care supplies that are for like ulcers. Okay? And so what I'm telling you is, until that issue is fixed, and hopefully the coalition can get some headway on that, the impact of insurance fraud is on the patient. And I want to bring that a third point of which the financial impact is. Because all that money was billed, and then I had to spend the next 2 months on the phone with Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services out of Baltimore, telling them my mom didn't get those because, gosh forbid, she needs a knee replacement or she needs something else. It already looks like she's gotten both braces, when in fact she just got 2 braces that probably were $30 out of a Walgreens, okay? So there's a little bit of a case study here that I wanted to run through. So when we look at insurance fraud, and this was a insurance fraud case that billed private insurance companies, individual didn't want to, had a criminal record, so couldn't own a company in his own name. So at first he got some friends and family members, and then he recruited other people. And then over about a year period of time, all of a sudden he had 10 small companies in different counties, okay, all in strip malls. Not very much rent. He would put up a display worth of equipment, okay, and started billing. He ran the operations. His wife did the billing. They targeted certain plans from certain insurance companies. You have, platinum plan, gold plan, silver plan, you go off the exchange. They would use one of the gold plans that paid a lot, okay? And then they submitted the claims. They did test claims. And so they did test claims first to see whether they would pay and how much they would pay. And then they adjusted accordingly. So each one of the different facilities billed something different. And then they got to see, well, such and such insurance company paid this much and such insurance company paid that much. Now, if you can imagine that, they start figuring out the game and they keep building the network. Then, where the mistake was made, they started going bigger. They're like, well, geez, if all these private insurance companies are going to pay, I'm going to go after like Medicare and Medicaid. And so they started billing and they popped up and they just wound up, going into a, basically a data analysis pool that was run by CMS that they had essentially, an analyzed program in there to look at the anomaly, and they said, hey, this doesn't seem right. And they reached out and it kind of overcooled. But I think the point of this, though, is the scheme does not have to be, this is not something that is really technically advanced. I mean, this is a billing program, renting some space, okay? You're stealing, and you can look up NPI numbers and you can look at doctors that are in their 70s and 80s, and you can start billing things. And if you do it once, you do it twice, now you're at 10 different locations, okay? The amount of money adds up very, very quickly. Now that the impact is on the system. So now you've impacted Medicare, you've impacted Medicaid, you've impacted over 6 private insurance companies, okay? That's money that should be going elsewhere to people that actually need the care, right? And then the money trail, it was pretty interesting. They wanted a cash business. So they bought their first plant nursery. So what happens with plant nurseries? Got to put a lot of money into it. But what happens? There's spoilage. Things happen, right? A lot of cash business. I've got a field. I've got 20 acres of everything from palm trees to, azaleas to everything else. And that's where they ran the money through. Okay, so they're looking for a cash business. So the impact is on the person, the financial impact. Because my mom there was actually an amount down at the bottom that she needed to pay. She didn't pay it, of course, and we fought that. But I'm saying you have an 83-year-old who's on a fixed income who's now worried. And so the financial impact is great on our most vulnerable, the elderly, who needs the most protection. They use casinos a lot, and they use cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is a whole nother deal. That's for a lot of ways down the road. I want to spend the last couple of minutes on lessons learned. So there's a few points like financial impacts that happen that you just don't think about. One of which is the higher premiums. To go back to those first couple of slides, that happens for consumers. It's also going to be identity theft. So they're going to have to clear things up. They're going to have to spend money. So it's money coming out of the consumers in your various states. 2, much like everybody here, it's going to be investigative resources across the board. SIU units, fraud and enforcement divisions. That's why Mark and I are here across the board. People aren't getting the services that they need and are medically necessary. You're scaring your consumers because they're seeing fraudulent activity pop up and they're not owed that, or there's money stolen. When fraud continues to permeate, it also erodes public trust in the system. And so a state agency like the Maryland Insurance Administration, we try to be like that beacon, the person that at least listens first, right? That's an outlet to somebody that helps them fix their problems. And it could be broad-based over a lot of different areas. But we try to put all of our efforts into helping that person become financially whole after the impact of an insurance fraud, no matter what it is, whether it's a title insurance scheme, no matter whether they gypped out of an escrow account, whether they were a victim off of our health exchange, whether they used an unauthorized health plan and they got no benefits after paying premiums again. It hurts people that are the worst, that don't need to be hurt. And so it erodes public trust. And lastly, it stresses the financial system. Okay? You're putting a lot of illegitimate money through there. Most of it is not going through the tax system. Okay? And so those four things are huge financial impacts. For us at the MIA, we reach across state lines. I know Mark and Rob Gwynn, who's our Associate Commissioner of Fraud Enforcement, he couldn't be here today. And all of our other MIA employees that are here today, we reach across state lines, we collaborate, we ask what's going on in those states, we share information. It's extremely important on that. The other thing is staff training. The training should be regular, it should be routine, and it should be vigorous. If you're doing a training once a year, and this is a personal opinion, I don't speak on behalf of the MIA on this, you're not training enough. Things are happening at the speed of sound right now with AI and some of the schemes that are coming out. So we want to be on top of that, not behind it, proactive and not reactive. And lastly, when I was associated with the Greater Palm Beach Healthcare Fraud Task Force, we had a bunch of different mission that we wanted to take care of. And I always thought the most important, which is kind of what I gained with like my public speaking here today, was to educate the public and my colleagues. And it's to get out there and to be an advocate and to tell people, hey, this is out there. And if you see something, say something. Because you need to be on the front lines of that. The North Carolina Department of Insurance, under Commissioner Mike Causey, does a fantastic job. They do town halls all across the state, and they have a whole fraud and enforcement regulatory authority. They do licensees and things of that sort. They do a terrific job. So I say, get out amongst the people. In the Bureau, they always said, get out, there are no cases made behind your desk. You need to hit the streets. Go talk to people, find out what's going on, and make sure that we protect the most vulnerable. The impact is great. I think the most important thing leaving here today, and I wanted to put it on here, I just didn't, it got changed before, is if you can take a photo of that, I wanted to put phone a friend. And so if I could help in any way after you leave here today, if you have a question, I have a great Rolodex, and so does my colleagues. The MIA is here to help, not just in Maryland, but we want to do the best we can while we're at it. And so please feel free to go ahead and reach out to me at any time. Send me an email. I'll set up a Zoom with you. I'll give you every bit of advice. And if I don't know the answer, which many times I don't, I'll make sure that I find somebody that does. But I'll turn it over to questions, and I don't know if Greg has any from that way, but I'll throw that out there. But I really appreciate your time today, and thank you very much. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Sean. Great presentation. Sean is going to be around here a little bit if anybody has any questions. He's always happy to take them. And following that, you can always contact me, Greg Welker. I can get you in touch with Sean also. But again, thank you, Sean. Very much appreciated. It's great.